Welcome to Moments with Marianne. I'm so delighted we're spending this time here today. We have a very inspiring show coming right up with special guest, Bill Konigsberg, and he's here today to share with us his new book, The Bridge. Now just imagine two teenagers, strangers to each other, have decided to jump off the same bridge at the same time. But what results is far from straightforward in this absorbing, honest lifesaver from acclaimed author Bill Konigsberg. Now, many of you know Bill. He's an award-winning author of 6 young adult novels. He won the Penn Center USA Literary Award, the Stonewall Book Award in 2016, the Sid Fletchman Award for Humor, and was a finalist for the Amelia Elizabeth Walden Award and the Lambda Literary Award in 2014. His debut novel, Out of the Pocket, won the Lambda Literary Award in 2009. In 2018, the National Council of Teachers of English Assembly on Literature for Adolescents established the Bill Konigsberg Award for Acts and Activism for Equality and Inclusion through Young Adult Literature. So let's welcome to the show, Bill Konigsberg.
Thank you. It's very nice to be here, Marianne. Thank you.
Oh my goodness, what an honor it is to have you here and to talk about this book. And I have to ask you, what inspired you to write this book?
Well, I wrote this book a few years ago, and at the time, there was this epidemic of suicide happening where I live in Arizona and across the country, really. What I was seeing was a lot of anxiety in the kids that I was working with. I work with a lot of young people, and I was at the time doing that. And also, it was happening in first responders. It was happening to a neighbor's son who was a fireman. And that brought up a lot for me because I'm somebody who dealt with suicidal ideation all my life. I'm a person who writes books for young people. And everything I had written to this point had been about really LGBT issues, which is also something that's true. I'm a gay man. But I'd never really thought about writing something on that very challenging topic. It felt, oddly, it felt so personal. It felt almost more personal than writing about LGBT issues. And I finally decided to give it a shot and see what happened.
Well, I'm so glad that you did. I mean, this book was very profound, and I love the direction that you took. It's in a way that most people would be very surprised by.
Yes, and I don't mind talking about the structure at all because I think it's something that can be helpful for people to know going into it. The structure of this book, basically what this book is about, are 2 teens, Aaron and Tilly, who meet on top of the George Washington Bridge in New York City. They are both there to jump, and they interrupt each other. And based on what happens the moment that they are sitting 100 feet apart, both with one leg over the railing, the world splits into 4 different realities. So we get 4 stories, 1, 2, 3, 4. And in the first one, Tilly jumps, and we get the story of the aftermath for Aaron and his choice of not jumping. And we get also Tilly's family and all the people in her life. And when that story is over, we go right back to that very first moment. And this time, Aaron jumps and Tilly doesn't. In the third story, they both jump, and we flash into the future, and we meet people who we hadn't even met before who have been impacted by the absence of these 2 people, as well as, of course, friends and family of Aaron and Tilly. And finally, in the fourth story, and most importantly, they both decide not to jump. And so this is the story about their choice not to, and the incredible connection that is created by the 2 of them, and how it is life-saving and life-changing for them. So really, this is a story about options from somebody who knows that I can tell you that when I've been depressed, the last thing I think I have are options. I've felt like it, I don't have any choice. it feels as though nobody would care if I were here or gone. And I wanted to dispel all of those sorts of ideas that people have when they're depressed and show, well, here are all of the different things that one could do in that moment and see how different the world winds up based on those choices.
Well, it's so interesting. A lot of times, when we're not looking through the goggles of depression,
Right.
it's the way you have your book structured really gives people a view into how it impacts so many other lives by the choices that we make. And some of these, when we look at the choice of suicide, I mean, that's something that while it may feel like it's taking care of someone's pain in the moment, and we definitely don't, ever say that that's an option, but it ends up affecting all these other people as well.
Yes, and I was very interested while I was writing about this in the butterfly effect of the choice in that moment, because I know in my lowest moments I have felt that it would not matter if I were here anymore, that no one would care, and really that's the insidiousness of the disease, is that it impacts our brain and it makes our brains lie to us. So uh, it's a challenge. The thing about it is when I am depressed, it's very, very hard for anybody to get through to me. So I am aware of that as a writer, that depressed people struggle to hear. It's a form of disconnection, at least in my life when I felt depressed. But still, I felt like it was worth a shot. And maybe if just one person uh, would read this book and then in the moment of feeling their worst would think about it, maybe it would save a life.
Yeah, I mean, what a huge impact your book is making. And I know that this is, written for the young adult audience, but it seems like it's a book for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, I really do think this is a book for everyone. I mean, it is a young adult book in terms of the way it has been marketed, but it also breaks a lot of young adult rules. Young adult books are not supposed to come from any perspective other than teenagers. And this book is omniscient perspective. So we get the parents' perspective, which is, I have heard from a lot of older people that this has resonated a great deal with them for that reason.
Well, here you go, breaking barriers again, right? So,
Well, what are you going to do? I like to write what I like to write, and I figure my editors will tell me if I can't.
well, I think it's just so important to have this discussion, especially now with people being confined for such long periods of time. I mean, in many ways, we're just all kind of struggling to deal with that. And I know it's affecting everyone's, mental well-being, being able to be so isolated.
I am so concerned about the hidden mental health crisis that's going on right now. I mean, I think all of us, you said it exactly correctly. I think all of us are struggling with mental health issues. And I'm really afraid for people who are suffering on top of their mental health issues, people who deal with depression. I've said to my husband before, I feel so fortunate to have the situation that I do. I would find this so isolating. And so I do want this book to be speaking to people who right now are feeling isolated and feeling alone. Because the message of this book really, in some ways, is uh, we're all here together. That we are all connected, and we're never in the moment that we feel alone. We are never fully alone.
Yeah, and it's interesting, when someone does end up taking their lives. Again, because I have friends that have had their children do this, and it's heartbreaking. It impacts everyone around them in ways that sometimes there's no healing from that.
I know several people who have lost children, and it was very interesting while writing this book to talk to grief counselors as well as parents. Grief counselors gave me a lot of background and insight, and they say, you sort of rearrange your life around the pain, and that's not something. I'm not a parent, so I sitting in that chair as somebody going through that is such a stretch for me. and my heart just breaks. It's too much pain, you know?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Just from hearing from people I know as well. I mean, I'm not a parent, but hearing it, it's heartbreaking. And I'm looking at your book, and my goodness, you must have done some profound research for this. I know you took a lot of your own personal story from this, that created this book as well.
Yeah, there is a fair amount of me in this book. In some ways, metaphorically, this book is about me in that I've split my childhood into two different characters. When I was, these characters are in New York City, and when I grew up in New York City in the way long time ago, I had parents who split, who lived on the west side and on the east side. My characters, Aaron lives on the west side, Tilly lives on the east side, and really metaphorically, they are two different parts of me. And in that way, they have two different types of depression. I think Aaron's depression, very much like mine, was just a chemical depression. Was just that it was always there, like a heavy sweater on him at all times, and he didn't know it was there because we all just live in the world we live in. We don't understand we're depressed until somebody tells us. And I think Tilly's depression is situational. I think she feels very separated from her family. She has a situation, she's adopted, and her family, after adopting her, was able to conceive, and she has a younger sister, and she feels, because she's also Korean and they're white, she feels very separated. She feels as though she is she's an outsider. And I felt that way because my father remarried and had a child, and I felt very much like I didn't quite fit in. So I was dealing with a lot of my own shadows in this book, and I tend to do that with my writing.
Was there any other research that you did that kind of surprised you as you were bringing together all the pieces for this book?
One of the things that surprised me was my visit to the George Washington Bridge. I had never been there. It was always outside my window growing up on the west side, and when I went there, I could feel the psychic pain of the place. There's a sign that says something about mental health as you walk up the stairs and about a suicide hotline, but I could actually feel. I'm not really a person who believes in things like ghosts, but I could feel it. It was quite something. And so writing about the bridge changed a lot after that visit. Beyond that, I mean, it's all a little surprising. When you talk to people and you learn about their experiences, it changes perspective very easily.
Was there any part of this book that was challenging for you to write?
I think that writing about Tilly's feeling disconnected from her family was very hard for me to write. Especially, she's a very sensitive kid, and I could feel it from my own inside young person. Could feel her pain a lot, and I would sometimes, after writing a Tilly section, would have to lie in bed for a while. But I also had to, consider. Because I was writing about depression, I had kind of made allowances for that. I had talked to a lot of people in advance and said, I'm going to need some help when I'm writing this book. Are you available? So I would check in with friends regularly, and just people looked after me. It's a thing that I think we ought to do when we're writing hard stuff. We try to take care of ourselves.
Well, it's so good to have a support system, especially when you're writing, but just in life in general. And to have that, I think, is good for our listeners and our readers to know, hey, maybe you should create a support system at home as well.
Yeah, I think that figuring out our connections can be so important, especially if we're in a time when we're feeling well. It can be a really good idea to look around and start to think about, what is my support system and how can I make sure those people know that they're my support system, and vice versa, because we might not know that we're somebody else's support system. And those connections are everything in life as far as I'm concerned.
Now, when you went and you split up the story into these four different realities, was it your intention to show the consequences of what each action could be for, for the reader?
Yes, I guess I wanted to show consequences. I wanted to show possibility. When, as I said earlier, when it has felt like there isn't possibility, I wanted to show all of the things that could be. I didn't want the book to feel like a lesson. So in some ways, when I hear the word consequences, I think, you know, if you do this, bad things will happen. If you do this, good things will happen. And that's not to me how life works. Does that make sense to you? No, that like I wanted
Yeah.
to be clear that there are better choices uh, than jumping off a bridge, but I didn't want the book to feel uh, like a lecture.
No, I can understand that completely. And I actually like how it comes from the option of possibilities. And I
Mhm.
think that's a beautiful way to look at it because when people start looking at like, hey, I have options in life, then
Right.
there's hope.
Right. And you know, especially you brought it up earlier about this time. There are days that I feel just no hope right now. And it's just been such a difficult time the last many, many months. And so I'm looking for hope wherever I can find it. And I'm sure that a lot of people are looking for that.
Oh, I'm right with you on that one. So, I know how that is. It's like if I can get hope somewhere, I'm all over that,
Yes,
you
please.
know. And it's interesting. I mean, because books have such a life. When did you start writing this book? Has it been a couple years, or is this something that just kind of grew out of the pandemic?
No, this book was a couple years old. It took me a long time to write because really I was writing four different stories. And I first had to find that. How did these stories work together? It was a form I'd never used before. So this came from. I would say that in total, it took me 2 years to write this book. Or it was a real process. And I must say, by the way, I'm glad it's done. I'm glad I don't have to write this one again. This was a challenge.
Well, it couldn't come at a more better time than now as people are really kind of diving into, just mental health topics. I mean, a lot of us are kind of searching, like, hey, how do I maintain my mental health while we're going through this difficult time? And I felt like, gosh, what a powerful book to be released right now.
I so appreciate you saying that. Thank you. Uh, it's a powerful time in some ways for it to be released, and it's also a challenging one because I think a lot of people, when they see this book up front, think deep, dark, and I understand that. Of course, that is where it begins. It's a challenging subject. I think a lot of people are looking for ways to feel better and aren't necessarily diving right into deep books. So it's a mix, and whenever it would be released, it was going to be that way. The exciting thing, and I can tell you this, is that we are in development for a TV, a limited series with Amazon on this, and that should be another life for it and another chance for people to learn about it. I'm very excited about that.
Well, congratulations, Bill. My goodness, when that happens, you have to let us know. We're going to plaster it everywhere, Because
Thank you.
I feel like, regardless of, if you're 8 or 88, I mean, I think this book is really just impactful for people. I found when I was reading it that it really provided a lot of hope and encouragement for people.
I see. I read it that way as well, and that's I'm of course the writer, so I'm biased, but that was how it was intended to be. And everyone's going to take it the way they do, but yeah, I think it's a book of hope.
One of the things I found really interesting is I've heard, between reading your book and just listening to other interviews that you've done, on this topic, you mentioned in one that how a person could be fine and also depressed. And I
Mhm.
think that that's really important because a lot of times people go, well, if you're fine, you're fine. You can't be both, but you can.
Absolutely, and in fact, an organization that deals with suicide called "To Write Love on Her Arms" read this book and decided to we partnered with them. And that was one of the things they really liked, was that this book got that right. And for me, as a person who's been depressed, it's been one of the most confusing parts of depression, that I could be out laughing with a friend and come home and an hour later be utterly not okay. But that's the way this disease works. It's, the only word I can think of is insidious. We can be perfectly fine and not fine at the same time.
Well, I think it's so important that you shared that, because I think a lot of times people may think, what's going on? Am I going nuts? Because I feel great. I'm hanging around people, doing whatever, feeling great. And then, when I'm by myself, things are kind of falling apart.
Right. And I think, I so appreciate you taking the time to talk to me about this, because I really do think as a society, we need to talk more about mental health and depression. I think in some ways the book was meant to be a discussion starter on that, because, I understand that it is a taboo to talk about depression, anxiety, all of these things. I think we do ourselves a great service to open up and realize that everybody has a story. It's not to say that everybody is depressed, but certainly everybody knows somebody who's depressed. And wouldn't it be nice if we could actually all just talk about it?
Yeah, I kind of move through that together. And it is books like yours that actually bring this to the forefront, especially for young people, because they don't talk about this kind of stuff, and they're very close-lipped about how they're feeling or what's going on. So to have a resource that they can use that would provide some hope, I think is so powerful.
Well, thank you. And I've heard young people report to me things like parents saying, them telling parents that they're feeling down, depressed, and having a parent say, "You have nothing to feel depressed about." And that's just a fundamental misunderstanding of depression. And of course, it's also dangerous. Like, we really have to listen to our young people, our kids, if they're asking for help, because a lot of young people do need help for this kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, telling somebody you don't have anything to worry, be stressed about or depressed about, is really not hearing what the person just told you when they're, I mean, how many cries for help does a person need to give,
Right. And I think a lot of kids do find ways to say something, even if they don't. And some, by the way, don't. There are kids who simply don't, which, not that this is a public service announcement, but it is an opportunity to say, talk to your kids, make sure you check in, because some kids don't show anything of this, but they're struggling on the inside.
I mean, I think there was a quote a while back, something along the lines of, you never know what the other person's going through, what struggles they're going through, and how true that is. My goodness. I mean, Bill, we could talk for hours. I loved your book. I'm afraid of keep talking because I don't want to give any of it away.
I understand. There are secrets and surprises in the book.
There are. And I don't, this isn't, we don't give spoiler alerts here, so we won't do that. Where can our listeners connect with you and learn more about The Bridge and your other books and be part of your community?
So my website is Bill Konigsberg, KONIGSBERG.com. I'm also active on Facebook and Instagram, less so on Twitter. Both Facebook and Instagram are just my name. And I welcome the contact from readers.
Well, Bill, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to talk to you.
Well, thank you, Bill. It has been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your new book, The Bridge. The Bridge is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all indie retailers. And if you don't see it on the shelf, ask for them to order it. And of course, it's available on Kindle. Again, if you'd like to connect with Bill, you can at his website, billkonigsberg.com, for more information. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. You're listening to Moments with Marianne. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Sunday, Monday, Thursday, and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. Pacific Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.